Darshana Jain has done MA, MPhil and PhD in Jainology from the University of Madras, Chennai. She is now the professor and the head of the Department of Jainology, University of Madras, Chennai. She is also the course coordinator for Part-3 Studies Research Foundation for Jainology. She is specialized in teaching Jainism through original sources. She has more than 20 years of teaching experience in Jaina philosophy and Prakrit languages at the university level. She is the resource person for many national and international groups interested in study of Indian religions. She has authored, translated and edited books related to Jainism. She has participated and presented several papers at national and international seminars and conferences. She is also the resource person for the UGC sponsored Academic Staff College orientation courses for teachers in India.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series on environmental sciences. In today's lecture, we are going to talk about environmental awareness in ancient Indian traditions, and today we shall discuss about the awareness that is there in the Buddhist tradition. So very briefly, I present to you the contents. The summary of the contents is that first we'll understand how Buddhism arose as a revolt against the Vedic practices, and then what really is the original Buddhism, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the bloodless sacrifice that Buddha spoke about, and the interconnected nature of man and the environment, and what Buddha says about the small creatures, plants and trees, and what do we understand by one in all and all in one. And Buddha naturally embraces ecology, and he says that we should live like a bee. And what is the clear comprehension of suitability? The trees are considered sacred in Buddhism, and 3 typical examples of modern day engaged Buddhism and the Buddhist declaration. So these are the contents that we will be discovering during the course of this lecture. So let us begin. First, we have the slide telling us about how Buddhism arose as a religion, as a tradition, as a revolt against the Vedic practices. The Vedas practices in the name of religion involved the killing and slaughtering of innocent dumb animals and entailed felling up green trees and large-scale destruction of forests. Buddha, along with Mahavira, the leaders and reformers in the history of mankind, revolted against the abhorrent Vedic practices. So, the slide says that there was a shift and turning away from the violence-ridden and soulless rituals discerned in the Upanishads had undoubtedly been under the benign influence of Buddha's teachings. Buddha brought about a complete transformation of the religious practices and the mindset of the people 2500 years ago, reinterpreted and redefined the concept of sacrifice, and thereby he was instrumental in bringing about a change in the Indian outlook and tradition. So what did he mean by the true sacrifice? Innocent, dumb creatures were sacrificed in different yagnas in the name of religion. According to Buddha, the true sacrifice is the sacrifice of one's own self for the welfare and happiness of all sentient beings, that is, sentient creatures. So the original Buddhism is, at the empirical level, Buddha said, know yourself and validate what you know. At the scientific level, he spoke about the cause and effect experiments. At the practical level, it was a very practical, a pragmatic religion and not a speculative one. At the therapeutic level, it spoke about suffering and how to end the suffering. At the psychological and metaphysical level, it began with human problems instead of the universe. At the egalitarian level, it said women have equal rights and caste divisions were not important. And at the individual level, Buddha said, be a lamp unto yourself, appa deepo bhava, be a light unto yourself, work for your own salvation with diligence. So he spoke about the 8 precepts, which are: know the truth, say nothing to hurt others, practice meditation, control your thoughts, resist all evil, free your mind of evil, work for the good of others, and respect life. This is in brief the summary of the 8-fold path that that Buddha taught. So the 5 precepts, which are a part of the 10 commandments, the second half of the 10 commandments, are nothing but the 5 precepts preached by Buddha. He said, knowing how deeply our lives intertwine, I undertake the training to abstain from. Buddha said that all life and life forms are intertwined, and so the practice of these 5 is very, very important. He said, abstain from killing living beings, taking things not given, sexual misconduct, false speech, and intoxicating drinks and drugs. These 5 are the basic vratas or vows that any Buddhist is admonished to follow. Then Buddha said about the sacrifices. Let us continue with the sacrifices. The sacrifice that we have to do is to take to these practices, conquering the lower ego and realizing the higher reality. So Buddha tells King Bimbisara of Magadha, and as for your saying that for the sake of dharma, I should carry out the sacrificial ceremonies which are customary in my family and which bring the desired fruit, I do not approve of the sacrifices, for I do not care for happiness which is sought at the price of others' suffering. He went on, for it does not befit the man of compassionate heart to kill another being who is helpless out of a desire for a profitable outcome, even though the fruit of the sacrifice should be permanent. How much less should one act thus when the fruit is transitory? So this is what Buddha told to Bimbisara. And then he spoke about the bloodless sacrifices. He said, and it is recorded in the Kutadanta Sutta, Buddha says about the bloodless sacrifice for lasting benefit and happiness. He told, in this sacrifice, Brahmins, no bulls are slain, no goats or sheep, no cocks and pigs, nor were various living beings subjected to slaughter, nor were trees cut down, nor were grasses mown. Those who are called slaves or servants or workmen did not perform their tasks for fear of blow or threats, weeping and tears. But those who wanted to do something did it. Those who did not wish did not. They did what they wanted to do, and they did not do what they did not want to do. So freedom to do what you have to. The sacrifice was carried with the ghee, oil, butter, curds, honey, and the molasses. So this is the bloodless sacrifice that Buddha preached. And then Buddha said, as there is interconnectedness in nature, the truth is that we are selfless, lacking any self-power, self-nature, or self-existence of our own, but dependent on the vast multitude of human beings and other creatures in the world for our existence. As we are all interconnected with every other living being in the universe, in a vast infinite network of mutual dependency and mutual support, so when this being the ultimate truth, love, compassion, and non-violence become the law of life. And as such, the concern and consideration we have for our own welfare and happiness should be extended equally and irrespectively, selflessly, for the welfare and happiness of all the living beings unequivocally. Buddha said, all in one, one in all. In the beautiful poetic verse of the flower ornament sutra, that is, the different sutras talk about different things. So this says, compare the intricate and profound interconnected reality of the world to an infinite net of gems, and he called it as the Indra's jeweled net, which reaches out to the infinite space. So at each knot on the net is a crystal gem which is connected to all the other gems and reflects in itself all the other jewels on the net. So it is one garland with infinite pearls, with many pearls. So even if one pearl is not shining, then the whole garland doesn't look beautiful. So all elements in nature are equally important. Buddha said, we are like those gems, in each all and in all one. So without others, one is not there, and without one, the others are not there. One cannot be happy without making others happy, and others' sufferings are our own suffering. So what does Buddha say about this interconnectedness? He says, the trees, the plants and the animals, all the living beings are dependent on each other and are all interconnected. Innumerable small creatures are working for other beings and for mankind unknowingly and selflessly, untiringly, without expecting anything in return, without any reciprocal benefit. So, cutting of trees extravagantly also means interfering with the lives of these small creatures. And so, a Buddhist is advised, is admonished, is taught not to cut down any single tree. So, Buddhism naturally embraces the ecology. Interdependence, emphasized as the ultimate truth, the Dhamma, by the Buddha, is the spiritual truth that biologists have independently discovered through the scientific discipline of ecology. Buddhist teachings can provide a firm philosophical foundation and support for natural ecology and environmental protection movements that are absolutely necessary for our own future survival. The philosophy of interconnectedness and the recognition that human beings are essentially dependent upon and interconnected with their environments give rise to an instinctive respect for nature. So man has become insensitive to life forms, and the purpose of these religious traditions is to sensitize man towards the sufferings of others and help him to help others and indirectly help himself. So Buddhism says what hurts the environment and planet hurts us because of the principles of interconnectedness. Buddhist thought is inherently ecological and fully centered on nature and the world. This focus on interconnectedness is also reinforced by two important values within Buddhism, that is compassion and loving kindness. So these are the panacea for the present day illnesses of the world. In the Dhammapada, Buddha says, with a beautiful analogy, he shows the way how one should interact with the world, with the nature and with all sentient beings. He says, be like the bee which takes the honey and in turn pollinates the flower, and both of them benefit. Thus, whatever should be beneficial to not only you but also the others. Do what is beneficial to you and to the others. Life revolves around the axis of mutual dependency and mutual support. But the wise live without injuring. Nature, as the bee, drinks honey and flies away without harming the flower, its petals, its color, or its fragrance. So may you live without harming the environment, and on the other hand, nurture the environment in the best possible way you can. Buddha talks about the guarding awareness on every action. The Satipatthana Sutta, Buddha says, emphasizes the importance of establishing mindfulness, awareness of whatever one does at every moment of life. Whatever action one contemplates upon, that should be carried out with the following two kinds of comprehensions. First, have a clear comprehension of the benefit of the act you do, and secondly, clear comprehension of suitability. Is it suitable for myself and for all other creatures? And only then take to the action. So this is the guarding awareness on every action of the Buddha. He talks about the clear comprehension of suitability thus. He says, all the movements, all the actions must be regarded beforehand, each for its suitability and appropriateness with regard to the specific place and time of execution. So one should be wise enough to think before one acts. So look before you leap. That is, each must be examined as to whether it is the proper, right thing to do in that particular place and in that particular time. Evacuation of urine or attending nature calls also requires too much of precision. This clearly suggests their environmental concern to ensure that whatever is harmful to the environment is to be avoided at all levels and at all cost. Buddha says that all the movements, all the actions must be regarded beforehand. The environmental concern in Buddhist monastic rules are also very, very rigidly told as they are told in the Jaina tradition. In the Patimokkha Sutta, Buddha says some important rules are laid down in the book of Vinaya, especially in the Patimokkha Sutra. He says a monk should not dig the land to avoid killing of small insects, earthworms, beetles, etc. He should not cut off even a branch of a tree. He should not pluck the flowers, the buds, the tender leaves and shoots except for medicinal purpose. Buddha says he should not spit on the pastures, he should not spit on the rivers, streams and lakes and dirty the water resources. He should not urinate in public, that is in the meadows. He should answer the nature calls and they should be done on the dry rocky boulders, etc. So the Buddha advised his disciples to live under the shade of a tree, technically called as Rukkha Moola Vasa. That means live under the root of the tree, under the tree, near the root of the tree. He advised his monks not to wander in the rainy season like Mahavira advised his Shramanas, because they may unknowingly step upon small creatures, tender snails and the newly hatched fish. So this way of living was called as Vasa, which means the rainy retreat, that is the Chaturmasa Varsha Vasa. He told his monks not to use the animal hides for covering the body, because this will include the killing of the animals. Under the monastic rules for the monks, he disallowed them to squeeze a flower, uproot any plant. He told them not to kill the mosquitoes even if they disturb him during their meditation. Then moving on to the sacredness of the trees in Buddhism. The Bodhi tree or the peepal tree, which belongs to the fig family, is a tree under which Buddha attained enlightenment, and this tree is venerated as the Bodhi Raja tree. It was under this Sala tree that he entered the Mahaparinibbana, and the Ajapala banyan tree is the tree under which he spent the 5th week after his enlightenment, sitting in one posture and enjoying the bliss of emancipation. And then Muchilinda tree is the tree under which he meditated during the 6th week after his enlightenment. At that time, there arose an unexpected great rain. The rain clouds and winds tried to disturb the Buddha. So thereupon, the Muchilinda, the serpent king, came out of his abode, coiled around the body of the Buddha 7 times and remained keeping his large hood over the head of the Buddha, protecting him from the elements of nature. So in fact, Buddha says all trees, plants and bushes are to be venerated, and as they are the sustainers of the ecological balance. In the Bodhicharyavatara Sutra, Shantideva says that mindful of the teaching of the Tathagata, be fearless and fearful, one should abandon immediately any such actions as breaking up the clods of earth, the ripping of grass, and drawing lines in the earth without any purpose. These not only wound the earth, but also endanger the lives of many creatures, and in the same way, the ripping of grass destroys the plant's life and also the lives of many creatures. Buddha talks about the right livelihood for the Buddhist householders. He told them not to choose those livelihoods which cause or which impact the environmental degradation. Example, the armament industry, which imperils the human future, should be a violation of the path of right livelihood. So a Buddhist should not take to the armament industry that is building up the arms and ammunitions. Any employment which causes damage to the environment, such as working in an industry that pollutes, manufacturing of toxic substances, felling of forests, the adverse exploitation of marine resources, etc., are all violations of the vow of right livelihood. So the means of livelihood prohibited by the Buddha are manufacturing and selling of arms and human beings, and trading with human beings, and breeding of animals for slaughter and selling of flesh of animals, manufacture and sale of intoxicating drinks, and this manufacturing of poison. All these are prohibited under this means of livelihood. So as the future survival of man is endangered, like the species that are endangered, so it is very important that one visits these traditions and undertakes these practices to save himself and the environment at large. So here we find three typical examples, very famous, world famous examples, and they are recorded in the book Buddhism and Ecology. It presents the three movements carried out by Buddhist practitioners in different parts of the world to conserve the environment, and they are: number one, the Sarvodaya Shramadana movement in Sri Lanka. The second is the forest protection movement in Thailand. And the third one is the engaged Buddhism practice by the world famous Buddhist, that is Han. So the first one is the Shramadana, Sarvodaya Shramadana movement in Sri Lanka, started by Dr. A.J. Aryaratne in the 1950s, and he addressed the problems of the masses in the villages in Sri Lanka, and he laid emphasis on cleaning the environment and providing safe drinking water, basic clothing, diet, housing, healthcare facilities, and also access to modern communication, energy, education, and cultural and spiritual resources to the people in those villages. So this was taken up on a mass scale by Aryaratne. The second one is the forest protection movement in Thailand. So Ajahn Pongsak, a Thai monk, he has emerged as an opponent of various legislations which have been detrimental to the efforts of preserving and rebuilding the forests in Thailand. He practiced what is known as engaged Buddhism, which is not content to simply meditating on issues, but rather taking Buddhism a step forward and the ideals to use in the service of others and the environment at large. So he was instrumental in protecting the forests that were cut down in Thailand for in the name of development. So his rationale is summed up in this beautiful quote from an interview with him. He said, Dharma or Dhamma, the Buddhist word for truth, and his teachings is also the word for nature. That is because they are the same. Nature is the manifestation of the truth and of the teachings. When we destroy nature, we destroy the truth and the teachings. When we protect nature, we protect the truth and the teachings. So very important, friends, in today's context. And then we move on to the engaged Buddhism practiced by Thich Nhat Hanh. He and his monks live up to the 14 precepts, and they are cast in such a way that they emphasize the idea of engaged Buddhism. the lifestyle practiced and taught by him and his monks shows how one can live a life which does not contribute further to the harm being done to the planet, and in fact how one can work towards a solution in saving the planet. We find the example of Bhutan. The Buddhist principles have replaced a limiting economic concept of GDP by that of gross national happiness. So exemplary forest protection laws have been put in place in Bhutan, whose happiness quotient is the highest in the world, and it is because of these small practices. In the advanced societies of Europe and the US, Buddhism has been embraced by many people searching for effective spiritual practice which will serve as a counterpoise to the environment of consumerism and nihilism. And we find another example of Kamprath given by Josh Hersfeldt. He says, "I am impressed with how naturally the Buddhist ideals and teachings merge with the goals of the environmental movement, as well as how they are so overlooked." He says, "Many do not realize that Buddhists have been environmentally conscious much longer than anybody can imagine. The Buddhist way of life in and of itself serves the planet, and if adopted can lead to an environmental lens through which to view the world." So with this I come to the last slide. It is about the Buddhist declaration which says, "The time to act is now." A unique Buddhist declaration has been prepared addressing the problems of climate change and energy crisis and highlighting what we need to do. This document, now put in public domain, emerged from the contributions of over 20 Buddhist teachers of all traditions. "The time to act is now" was composed as a pan-Buddhist statement by Zen teacher Dr. David Tetsuan Loy and senior Theravada teacher Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, with scientific input from Dr. John Stanley. So this is a document that you should read, which talks about the environmental awareness in Buddhist tradition in modern times. So with this, we come to the summary of the lecture. In this lecture, we saw about how Buddhism emerged as a religion founded by Buddha, as a revolt against the Vedic practices, and what really is Buddhism, what are the 8 precepts, the Eightfold Path, what are the 5 precepts, and what is the sacrifice that Buddha talks about. And then we moved on to talk about the interconnectedness of life and how it is important to be a true Buddhist, to practice non-violence towards the creatures, be small or big, and how Buddhism embraces the ecology and the suitability, comprehension of suitability, and how the trees are sacred in Buddhism. And then we moved on to talking about the 3 typical examples of the Shramadana movement in Sri Lanka, the forest protection movement in Thailand, and the engaged Buddhism practices. And then finally we saw the Buddhist declaration of the time to act is now. And with this, you should be able to take up these questions. How do you know that Buddhism is an eco-friendly religion? And second question, comment on the 3 examples of Buddhism that relate with the environmental friendly practices. What is the importance of trees in Buddhism? Throw light on the Buddhist declaration of time to act is now. Comment on the 5 precepts and their importance for sustainable development. And lastly, what should not be the means of livelihood according to Buddhism? With this, we conclude the lecture. Thank you.